Training the dogs is one thing, but training the people, that's really where it is, because now they can be better to their dogs. Their dogs can trust them more, and they're going to be more successful. And I've done a lot of coaching of people at nationals, and it's really what turns me on, is putting together the dog-handler combination and helping them understand each other. And well, success is bound to happen when you can do that.
Well, hello and good evening, everybody. It's great to have you. Well, this is our fourth, excuse me. I'm jumping ahead of myself, our fourth Purina Masterclass of the year. And first of all, of course, I need to thank Nestle Purina, everybody there, Carl Gunzer, Ray Vogt, all you guys that make great product for our dogs and make learning about these kinds of things possible through your Purina Masterclass series that you sponsor. Thank you for all you do. Well, we're going to have some fun tonight. We've got a power couple that you're going to hear about here in just a second, and you're going to learn some neat stuff. And well, we're glad to have you. We really, truly are. And with that being said, I'm going to welcome Clyde and Marilyn Vetter. And well, welcome, guys. Great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Hey there, Pat. Thanks for having us.
Good to see you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, before we do anything, well, I'm going to play a cool video. And then we're going to launch into, Marilyn, what you've got going right away. So let's watch this.
"43 years in the making. We built an organization with a track record of success, with a tremendous reputation, with more than 28.5 million acres of habitat accomplishments. To the names, Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. Today, we take the next step to capture the imagination of the next generation, to inspire a new audience of hunters and conservationists, to accelerate our upland habitat mission forward. The next evolution of Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever starts now."
How about that? And look what came today in the mail.
Good timing.
Perfect.
Wasn't that good timing?
It was like someone was watching your mailbox.
They were, and that's scary sometimes how things like that happen. Well, Marilyn, you're CEO and president of this incredible organization, and I had the true pleasure of getting to listen to you speak at Pheasant Fest, and well, it was certainly moving to me. And tell me a little bit about what's going on. You've had a big day here just recently, I understand.
We've had a couple of big days recently. So you played the video of our new branding launch, which was July 1st of this year. And it's the first time in 43 years that Pheasants Forever got a rebrand. And it seemed like good timing with Quail Forever turning 20 on Sunday. So a lot of remarkable dates in the very recent past.
So tell me how you got involved with this organization.
You know, I tell everybody in life that I think everything comes full circle to dogs. And so probably in your life as well, certainly in Clyde's. You know, as a kid, I was a big dog fan, but I wasn't into hunting, or and I would say that I was probably a natural conservationist because I was a farm kid. But when I got to know Clyde, he introduced me to hunting, and then we started building our German Shorthair Pointer line, and then just, you know, we jumped in with all 4 feet of ours, and then became NAVHDA judges and started running an AKC and shoot to retrieve, and it just went from there. And so then I got involved in NAVHDA and was on the board for 21 years, and Howard Vincent, our past CEO of Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, came to me about 11, 12 years ago now, and said, I really like what's happening at NAVHDA about bringing new audiences into the space, in particular women. And it was a charge at Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever at that time to really try to bring new audiences into the space. And they asked me to join the board. And I had been a member for many, many years because NAVHDA was really a good partner of Purina's. It's actually its longest standing partner of NAVHDA's, and one of the longest standing partners at Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. And so again, it just kind of came full circle. I was on the board for 7.5 years. And when Howard decided he was going to retire, I was also leaving my past career, and the timing seemed to be fortuitous for me. And I put my name in the hat and went through a really rigorous, challenging interview process. And I was honored and lucky enough to be chosen.
Fantastic. Well, hold on a minute. Some questions came in specifically for you and everything you got going. So hold on a minute here. Let me see.
Great.
Marilyn, advice for young women wanting to work in the hunting space. Do you have anything?
Well, geez, first of all, that's a broad question. There's a lot of it. So that, you know, certainly social media is particularly in the uplands. We just had a conversation about this at work today, and that the upland space in podcasting, certainly on social media platforms, has really taken off. But there hasn't been a lot of women influencers in this space. There's a few, and Callie Parmley and others, but not a lot. So if it's a really young person and they're interested in the digital space, I think there's lots of opportunity to get involved, either with doing their own platforms or actually partnering with people or organizations like Pheasant Forever and Quail Forever. We have large teams that are made of either marketing, or depending on what your emphasis is in the dog world, I'd say find a good mentor to learn from, most certainly. And if they're in the conservation space, it really kind of depends on if they're looking to get into wildlife biology. You know, when we look at our team at Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, a good almost 40% of our farm bill biologists are female. And that shows a huge transition that has taken place in the conservation field in the last few years. And it's really been remarkable to see a lot of young women join the space as well.
That's awesome. You know, my second guest on the Purina Masterclass series this year was Amelia Baxter. And Amelia is a professional Springer Spaniel field trial trainer. And Amelia's in her late 20s. And she was the highest achieving professional handler in AKC Springer Spaniels previous year. She got the Hogan Award, which was incredible. And I just had a great visit with Amelia. And how appropriate is that when we're talking about young women and the outdoors and that whole scene?
I would tell you that I think when Clyde does training seminars, and Pat, I bet you see the same thing, that women tend to come into those probably not with the same level of confidence. So they're really open and curious about learning, and they're much more open to and willing to adapt their trainings situations. And in fact, Clyde's been very close to a good friend of his who has a 12-year-old daughter who is become very accomplished in the French Brittany space. And she's run her dog at nationals and won on the circuit there, and has
she's beat up pros and has a NAVHDA versatile champion at 12 years of age, and she's just nothing like young kids getting into it.
So, Katie, bar the door. Don't let anything stop you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm very inspiring. I really feel that way. My last in my membership a few weeks ago, I interviewed a group of the highest level amateurs, and Lauren Hayes from Texas was the third woman to win a national championship, and we've had that discussion about the hurdles going through in mainly a male-driven sport and the things they had to deal with, and just great stories. And what you said is just that desire to win. And I find the same thing. I do a lot of workshops, and the majority of my attendees are females, and I find them, for the most part, very intuitive with dogs. Probably their biggest hurdle, you're right, is a self-confidence, natural competitive streak. But I'll tell you what, when they put it all together, they're hard to beat. They really are.
Yes.
That's great.
So, Marilyn, here's another question. What Pheasant Forever initiative / Quail Forever are you most excited about in the coming years?
I think maybe one old, one new. So one of the we have a new brand, and that doesn't imply anything other than that's branding. Our mission will never change. Our mission is to protect and restore upland habitat for pheasants, quail, and other wildlife that lives there. And one of the things that I think that is really important for people to know is that the majority of our work actually happens on private lands. So we do a lot of work on public lands for sure, but 70% of this country is privately owned. In some states, Texas, Kansas, Nebraska are upwards of 96, 98% privately owned. So that arena will continue to expand. And it's important for people to understand that that is super important, because that's where a majority of birds are nested and hatched. What I'm most excited about that's pretty new for us is to bridge. How do we then make that accessible to people that don't own that land? Because that's kind of the rub sometimes, right? Is if we're helping private landowners build their own conservation needs, which is phenomenal because birds don't know those boundaries. It's the work that we're doing in access. And so our PATH program, that public access to habitat, is what I'm most excited about as a shift. Access is the newest part of our mission statement, and it is the newest part of our platforms. And that we launched PATH in South Dakota with South Dakota Game Fish and Parks and South Dakota Tourism, hoping that we'd get 10,000 acres within a couple of years. And we're knocking on the door of 65,000 acres in less than 2 years. That shows that people are just super excited about it. We have an amazing partner with AKC Hunt that's helping us do that. North Dakota just announced $1 million to establish PATH and programming in North Dakota. We have a new initiative that we're starting in Oklahoma, a very small one we're starting in Michigan. That is the bridge to the future, I think, of the pressure that our public lands have, is finding ways to make the privately held lands accessible and incentivizing those landowners to do so. And also in most states, it removes their liability. So it's really a win-win for everyone.
That's exciting. I think all of us got into hunting dogs as hunters. I certainly did. And I grew up in Indiana, and it was certainly a challenge. You're right, to access places to hunt. And I grew up when, we used to hunt quail, and we saw them on a regular basis. Well, we didn't get to watch the other video, which I was super exciting that you played at Pheasant Fest. It was a longer video, but talked about the change in the whole scene in quail and how it's eroded and how you're working hard to bring that back.
Yeah, bobwhite quail in particular, it's declined by more than 80% since the 1970s. Upland birds in general, they sadly are not unique. Meadowlarks are probably pretty similar in statistics. Pheasants are probably close to 70% decline in some states, even more than that. And that's just the normal course, unfortunately, of loss of grassland habitat. And those birds are grassland birds. So the work that Pheasants Forever has done in the upper Midwest in pheasant country, was noticed by the agencies in the Southeast and said we could really use a counterpart that was focused on bobwhite quail. That was our beginnings, was on bobwhite quail in the Southeast, and now we've expanded that to the Southwest. And so we're actively working to protect and restore habitat for all 6 U.S. species of quail.
Yeah, I was just in Oregon, and I driving down the dirt road to a workshop I was doing, and I'll be darned, right in the middle of the road. Now, the quail I would see there that has the little tassels on the head would be the valley quail. That's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I know.
For you.
Yeah, little guys. All right, let me see. Let me see what else what we got here. All right, I've got some questions that'll come up in the dog training arena here pretty quickly. Well, let's dive into that. Marilyn, thank you so much for what you do. And we're super excited about this. And, well.
Thanks for the support.
It goes hand in hand.
Thank Purina enough for their support, not just for Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. Amazing support in the conservation field in general. Just a phenomenal.
You know, and when I grew up, the sticker we wore was preserve game, hunt with a trained dog. And I couldn't believe, I just believe in that totally. Certainly as predominantly a retriever trainer, but the versatile dogs obviously are retrievers. So having great dogs that retrieve game that we harvest, super important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right, a minute here. We got one come in here right now. This question is, I'm going to pop this up. Marilyn, do you think the downturn in quail populations is due to farming practices and the removal of hedgerows and ditch banks and natural habitat?
Yes, and so much more. And I wish it was as simple as that. I certainly, quail in particular are, they call them shrub obligates. They need to have not only grasslands, but they need that shrubby cover for them to, they have a whole lot of predators and they need a place to hide for sure. But quite honestly, that the biggest issue is the conversion of lands into home and developments. That has probably been, quite honestly, the biggest issue in the eastern part of the country, is the expansion of urban areas into those grassland areas. So between both expansion of agricultural use and domestic urban sprawl, those are definitely our 2 biggest issues.
Russ, thank you for that question. That's great.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to dive into some dog training stuff. So, the Vetters, obviously, you read a little bit about them. If you, that's why you're here. And if you're in the world of versatile hunting dogs, well, these folks are incredibly well known. And the first question that comes in, which was I mentioned to you when we talked last night, which launches us into your young dog raising. What learning activities do you do with these young puppies, 4 to 16 week, as well as even below that? You've got some real, well, I don't know if I'd call them, certainly innovative, but strong feelings on starting these puppies and what you do to prepare them to be trained and to go into the real world. Can you share that with us, please?
Yeah, we sure can. I go first. Well, obviously, Marilyn is the expert at whelping puppies and taking care of them the first couple, 3-4 weeks of their life. But what we've developed is in our whelping box program is making sure that the puppies actually learn how to deal with correction and, get them involved in so many different activities so that they learn to deal with so much more in life. So we actually start incorporating things at that 4 weeks of age. They start getting a lot of different toys and such. And then we actually start incorporating some toys that make a little bit of noise. And we want to try and bring out that prey drive in the puppies right away as soon as we can. And so actually I've gone ahead, and you see it now all over on YouTube. Ever since we've started it, you see it everywhere now, where we've hung a rope from the ceiling and attached like a stuffed toy that's got arms and legs and everything on it. And, they kind of bump into it and then they start grabbing it and another grabs it and they're pulling and tugging and, they're just playing with it and all tugging and pulling on it. And then actually we've got all these other stuffed toys and different bones and things all over to where they're always grabbing toys and then running around with them and playing with them. And then we do a lot of play retrieving and stuff with them as well. And it just really brings out that prey drive, and it also brings out that retrieving instinct. And then we'll kind of separate them also and do a little singly play retrieving with them, because obviously, you know as well as I do, retrieving is the key component to getting birds back. So as long as we can bring out all that natural desire to retrieve as early as we can, the better off we're going to be, and the easier it's going to be to teach them later on to, you know, once we put the insurance policy on the retrieving part of it. And then we also actually in our whelping box have our larger whelping box for like this 4 to 7 week old program, where we start actually potty breaking them and everything. And so we actually start taking them outside and potty breaking them, getting them used to all the outside noises and everything. And to get them accustomed to all the outside noises, once we introduce all the toys, and like I said, we start developing, introducing some toys that make noise. We actually have several toys. In fact, I've got, this stupid little bear that I pulled around when I was a kid. It had a string on it, and it just makes this god awful noise, right? And, you know, I put that one out at about 4.5 to 5 weeks mark, and they touch it and it's like a weeble. It wobbles and then it makes noise, and they'll touch it a little bit and then they'll back off and then they'll touch it. Honest to God, within like 2 days, that thing is flying across everywhere out here in the garage, and they're banging across, banging on it, and they're all jumping on it and they're attacking it. So what we're doing with all those objects, like with soap bottles and Tide bottles and all those different things, is getting them puppies to attack it, and it slides across the floor, and then they all jump on it and chase it. Well, we're putting noise along with the prey drive, so that once we get them out in the field and they start getting on birds and they're chasing birds, the noise from like a cap pistol and shotgun and all that just doesn't bother them at all. I mean, honest to God, I don't recall us ever getting somebody calling us up and saying, hey, my pup's a little sensitive to guns and to noise, and we just don't have that. We slam the doors like normal. We drop food dishes. We actually use stainless steel dishes, because it's amazing how, we've gotten some other puppies in for training and stuff, and they're not adapted to, like, even you put a stainless steel dish on the floor or something, and they're just not used to it. So we try and get them adapted to all those things. The other thing that we do that I think is very important is we teach them how to deal with correction. And they do that within the litter themselves. But like if one's trying to be a bully and he jumps on the other, I'm going to grab him and just, grab him by the neck a little bit and shake him up just a little bit and just say, knock it off. I'm the king here. You're not the king. And then you put them back on the ground, the tail goes right back up and they go right back to their business, but they know that that's unacceptable. So we're teaching them to deal with correction. And we're also building mental stability, which is going to be extremely important later on down the road when it comes to training and hunting. We all know we get into hunting situations where when the going gets tough, the tough got to get going, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what we're just building that mental stability also for, and the training programs to develop an elite hunting dog. For us, first and foremost, it's developing an elite hunting dog. And if we train an elite hunting dog, the testing part of it is easy. So we use the NAVHDA, and we're starting to get into some of the VHDF testing. We've used a lot of AKC stuff. And then for like our confirmation stuff, we use the AKC and the IABCA for International Outbreed Canine Association. So we use all of those programs to prove that our dogs are capable, but in the end, hunting is where it's at. I mean, I started hunting when I was 6 years old, trapping with my brother. And then I started upland and goose hunting when I was 8, and then got Marilyn involved a little later on. But developing a hardcore or an elite hunting dog is what I generally like to call it, is our goal.
One of the things, it kind of comes down to the word resilience. Mm-hmm. When people come to see a litter, invariably, if somebody steps on a puppy's toe or they get scared about something and they run to a corner, and people always want to coddle them. Uh-huh. and it's the first thing we say is, do not do that. They need to learn to adjust on their own. And that, I think, has been the biggest key. I think it helps. It does everything. It helps them build stamina, because on a hot day, when they don't want to retrieve that bird, when they've learned that there are no other options, that this is my job and I must adapt, it started from the very beginning. And that, I think, is what people underestimate, when they can start. They think that training starts at 6 months. Training starts as soon as their eyes are open and their ears are open and they're encountering the world.
But along with that, I don't want to sound like we're like, teaching these puppies like they're adults, because we don't. I mean,
Gosh, no.
There's a lot of pictures with me laying in the whelping box at 3 weeks. The puppies are 3 weeks of age, and I'm laying in the whelping box, and all of a sudden I fall asleep because I've had a long day training, and I'm laying there, and puppies all cuddled up around me, and I do that, through their 7-week time period that they're here. Is I'm laying on the floor. I'll get underneath a blanket, and they're jumping on me, and by the time we're all done, we're all just laying there and we're sleeping together, right? So we spend just a ton of time with our puppies and socializing them, and we always have tons of kids and stuff that come over to play with them, and other adults and everything, and get them used to all those situations for sure. But yeah, it's we've had some people that, like I said, Marilyn mentioned, where they'll step on a puppy's toe and then they'll pick it up right away, and it's okay, and we're like, put it down. And they look at us like, what? And we're like, just put it down. It's going to have a lot tougher things to deal with in life, right? And they put the puppy down, and it may have a fake limp for a little bit, and all of a sudden they're off playing again. I'm like, see, look at, we're teaching that mental stability and teaching him to deal with all that stuff that's going to get a little rougher in life. So that's generally how we go ahead and treat our pups, and try and raise and breed a real mentally stable dog, so that we can create an elite hunting dog later on in life.
I could just record that and take that to my next workshop, because that's pretty much what I just said over the course of the last month. It's certainly, a degree of mental toughness and that resilience. And you're right, when you start rewarding that negative behavior, pretty much you get more of that negative behavior. So you're right. That's awesome. And you're right. You're preparing them for the real world. And oftentimes when some people think they're actually being kind to them, they're actually being the exact opposite.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very, very cool. So there is one question that came in before we dive more into the dog training stuff. It says, Paul asks, we have recently bought 120 acres in southeast Alabama. 100 acres is woods, 80 acres being planted in trees. There are several coveys of quail. We've contacted with a forester to do control burns. Is there anything other than predator control we should be doing to help birds thrive? Can you point somebody in the right direction?
Congratulations, and kudos to you for putting in the hard work. Fire on the ground, it is, especially in that environment, is absolutely critical. What I would say is go to our website, and you can go into a Farm Build Biologist finder and put in your zip code and find one of our Farm Build biologists, and they will come out and they will help you evaluate whether there's other programs that you can access that perhaps you can tap into to help you pay for some of the work that could be done there, or they can help you figure out how to make a conservation plan for that. Because you're going to need to obviously think about not just the woody pines, but make sure that you have that whole continuum of from nesting and feeding cover. And that Farm Build biologist will help you walk through your grounds and tell you exactly what you can do there. And they are absolutely the best resource. And particularly, we have some folks in that part of the country. So I dig into the resource.
Paula, thank you for that great question.
And if you don't find it, just email me. I'm pretty easy to find. mvetter@pheasantsforever.org or quailforever.org. You can find me.
Or chase me down and I'll point you in that direction.
Cool.
Okay, so here's a question here. What trainer most influenced the way you guys train?
Oh boy. I'm going to be honest here. I was I was never one to read books, and we didn't have YouTube back in the day, which I would try and get a lot of people to stay away from. But I'm gonna. Bob West was probably by far my most influential. When I got started, when I got started training, I started in North Dakota, and then we moved down to Wisconsin, and I have several quotes that Bob has said over the years, and one of them was, "You don't learn anything by winning." And boy, was he was right. I've learned more by losing for sure. But I would absolutely have to say Bob West. Bob West was very influential. He was, yeah, you know, I've gotten it many times that I look like Bob West. I've been called his son a couple of times, and you know, Bob was just very influential. He was a great mentor. You know, we at times had some differences of opinions as well once I started getting into it a little bit more, but we always ended up on the same page. But yeah, Bob West for sure.
I think what was great about Bob is that he welcomes people to have different opinions, and it's like, bring it on. Let's talk about it. He's excited about having those dialogues. And
yeah, when we moved from North Dakota, I kind of started in North Dakota, but when we moved to Wisconsin is when I really dug into it. And then I would actually drive down to LeClaire and trained a couple times with him, and Ed Ryder actually would come over, who developed it. We'd get together and train, and you know, but yeah, Bob West is where I probably, he was the most influential.
And his books are really realistic.
Yeah.
That's what I liked about Bob, is that he wasn't training to train for a system. He was training hunting dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bob's a great guy. I've known Bob and Ed. I know Ed as well. So
yep.
You're naming some names from the past.
Yes, they are blasts from the past, aren't they? As we will be someday, right?
So I'm trying to look over at some of these questions. Certainly, our hot take was you don't teach woe, and we got to talk about that, and because it's going to lead into some of these other questions. So, would you expand upon that?
Yeah. So, you know, my very first dogs, we started out going to, you know, obviously the NAVHDA training days and such like that, and trained with other individuals who were getting ready for testing system or getting their dogs ready for fall hunting, you know, whatever it may be. And as many people do know, this ain't, you know, this is common knowledge. I hate check cords.
He really hates check cords.
Had I used check cords in the beginning? Absolutely. But, you know, being taught how to steady dogs with check cords, teaching them woe posts, you know, all these different things that you can do. Our dogs just lacked style. And we had our very first dogs that we had were out of PJ Wildfire, Tip Top Savage Sham, Checkmate Dandy Dude. I mean, they were all field trial dogs. So style wasn't, you know, not part of the genetics, right? So the style was there, but the steadiness programs that we were using just weren't working. And we're running our dogs in utility. We're getting prize ones, but they still kind of, it's good enough to get by, but they still look like crap in my eyes, right? Uh-huh. So this goes by for several years, and I'm just laying in bed thinking about this. You know, we used to always, when we ran on sharp tails and stuff like this, they were always fantastic. And that's when I started training with Ed Radar, and he had the Initech release trap, right? And he had tried a couple of different things where if the dog got too close to it, it would actually go off by itself, and you could set that. You didn't have to use the remote if the dog got close to it. But then trying to get the dog on the downwind side properly, you know. So I started looking at these release traps and like, oh gosh, I can use these to create wild bird situations. And that's just what I call them, you know, because sharptail or Huns or Quail, they're not going to hang around and let you creep in on them, right? So I use the release trap to create wild bird situations and back dogs off of point. And then I also use that release trap with pigeons. It just doesn't work with chuckers or quail in the traps. You have to use pigeons because pigeons fly high and the dogs can't catch them, and they realize they can't catch them, and they just start self-steadying themselves. And in fact, I had one of our personal 4.5-month-old puppies out today, and I think I had him on probably like 18 birds today just on one field search. We're talking a 20 to 25 minute field search. He was on 18 different birds, but you know, if he takes one step towards that trap, I pop it and he's going to run around. I got somebody reloading the trap quick again. He's going to come back in and repoint it. If he takes a step, I'm going to pop it. And he soon realizes that moving does him no good. and then they just start standing there, and then I'll shoot one for them, and they realize that if I stand still, I get a bird. And so I use that. I've developed that method, and there's more to it than that. I mean, it's hard to explain sometimes, but it's a system that builds a dog that looks like a statue on point. And I teach them that, by being steady, they're going to get a reward, and that there's going to be multiple birds. So the thing I like about this system as well is, I don't know if you've ever been sharptail hunting in early season, but we get a lot of what I call popcorn flushes, right? So if your dog chases that first bird, you're going to blow the rest of the covey out. So if they stand there and know that there's always more birds, they're going to wait till I get there. A lot of times too, they're going on point, and they may be 200 yards ahead of you. And by the time you get there, those other birds may have moved off just a little bit, but I can still get in front of the dog and maybe get a shot off at a bird or two, right? So I teach them that there's always more birds there. So in training, I never do just one bird. I've always do multiple birds off of one point, so that it teaches the dog that there's always more than one bird. Because we all know that when we're hunting, there's generally, especially if we're hunting birds that are in a covey, there's more than one bird. There might be one or two stragglers that are left there. And then two, when I use this program, I want that dog to look like a statue when he's going to continue to stand there. So one bird may flush, but I want him to still look like a statue. And then he's going to realize that there's more birds there. And then if I do get a shot off at one and kill it, then he's going to get a retrieve, and he's going to know it's worth it. So by using some of the old methods, I didn't like the way that our dogs were looking on point, because we were teaching whoa, and it's a grueling process. Most of them that I've seen, right, in my eyes. Now, I know that some of the field trialers and stuff, they do it a little differently. The disadvantage that we have in the versatile dog world is we do so much retriever training with our dogs. We force break our dogs, or trained retrieve, whatever you want to call it. And so 50% of the tests that we run, and even in our hunting situations, there's so much retrieving. So we force break our dogs. Therefore, we're bringing out the prey drive in our dogs as well. So they want that bird, right? So now we got to teach them that they got to stand there and wait as well. So, and that's where the grueling process of the whoa training can break that dog down so much. So that's where the multiple bird comes in and keeps that dog looking high head, high tail, and looking pretty as can be. And then so what I do is, once I have that dog standing there and watching birds just fly away, I ran 3 pups in natural ability this spring, and every one of them was steady until the shot was fired. Okay, so that's more than what's required of a natural ability dog, but I'm never going to hold up a dog's training for a test. Like I said, I'm creating an elite hunting dog. I'm just going to test them when the time's right, or when the tests come upon us. So once they're standing there and watching birds fly, then and they're looking like a statue, and I can actually throw 4 or 5 pigeons out and chuckers, and they're all flying in a different direction. That dog just stands there, high head, high tail. That's when I'm going to start overlaying the command whoa on top of that dog standing there looking like a statue. Because in the end, once the process is already through, when I say whoa, because my dogs do end up stopping when I holler whoa, they're going to stop as well. But generally they're going to stop, and they're going to be up high, and there's going to be a bird coming. I'm going to start associating birds with it when I do that, and then they're going to get a retrieve as well. But I want them, when I say whoa, to just come up high and like, okay, what's going on? I don't like it when I see somebody say whoa and their dogs, the ears come down and their head drops and their tail tucks and they droop. I just don't like that look. So that's why I've developed this system to where I overlay whoa. And when you think about it, it's the same as, I'm sure you teach your dogs to come or here, you come or here, and then you overlay the whistle on top of that.
Right.
Same theory. It's just the same theory.
Well, certainly steadiness in retrievers is a big part of that. And, it was very common over the years to use a healing stick or things to correct dogs from moving. But more than anything, similar to what you just described, is that denying the retrieve itself was more powerful than the correction.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And the reward of the retrieve became the most powerful. And so what you're saying is the reward of being able to sit there and smell the bird and have it not leave ends up being more valuable, and they almost teach themselves more than you.
They do. I call it self-steadying. They actually just start self-steadying themselves, and there's no harsh corrections or anything with it, and that's why the dogs stand there and they look so great. But that's how a lot of my whole system is rewards, right? I rarely, even if a dog makes a mistake, and once they're more finished, if they break and make a mistake and I shot a bird, I rarely will walk out and pick it up. I call them back, and generally with the process that I use early on, I call them back. I try not to ever touch my dogs. That's kind of a pet peeve of mine. And anybody that actually comes to my seminars, that's the one thing, like, stop touching your dog, stop touching your dog, so I just call them back. They'll come back and they actually place themselves right where they were before. And immediately I'm going to throw another bird down right in front of them and flush it the same way. All right. And then I'm going to shoot that bird there. So let's just say they break again, I'm going to call them back, throw another one right down in front of them, shoot it. And if they stay, now I'm just going to praise them. I'm going to walk over to them. Then I'm going to praise them, pet them, and then I'm going to send them to retrieve. But now that turns into what? 3 bird retrieves, So now I'm going to make them work a little bit. Okay, now they got to work and they got to trust, so we do all our lining drills and everything a little bit like retrievers do, but we've had to modify it to not take too much out of our versatile dogs, because we need a lot of independence for like our duck work and our field searches and things like that. So we got to be careful of not taking too much out of the dog. So yeah, and then I just go ahead and make it a little work where they got to make 3 retrieves, not just 1. So now we're building memory and everything else on the dog. So it turns into like I said, it ends up being a little bit more focus driven also, that they have to start paying attention to. But yeah, we do a lot of multiple birds. We shoot a lot of doubles and triples too off of dogs on point. And then if we get into braces as well, we may have 4 or 5 birds on the ground where we got to do retrieves as well. So we just we kind of just up the ante on everything a little bit.
So one of the other questions is probably quite pertinent to this. How do you train a dog to back without souring the dog?
Oh, I love this one. So that is one of my biggest pet peeves is, I qualified for the invitation. I got a prize winning utility. I'm got to start training backing. And I'm like, well, what do you mean start training backing? Your puppy backed from day one, right? We've all seen a litter of puppies, and maybe some people don't realize this, but I'm sure you've seen probably a litter of puppies, pointers, short hairs, whatever it may be, pointing breed, out in the yard, and they're all running around, and all of a sudden one stops or one's peeing and the other one stops, and then they have this stare down, right? So puppies, when they have that stare down, that's your backing instinct right there. Okay. So actually, like my little 4.5-month-old puppy, I'm doing backing drills already with him. So I don't teach backing. I foster it. It's there. Pointing dogs, almost all pointing dogs. Now, there are some breeds that have a little more tracking instinct and stuff in them to where it might be a little more difficult. But I start teaching backing at 4 to 4.5 months of age. But again, like my little 4.5-month-old pup right now, I bet just in the last 2 weeks he's been on, and I have the people to back it up. He's been on probably at least 60 birds. So I do a lot.
You shot that many.
No.
You could get by with 20 homers.
Yes, for sure. So then I actually start with an auto backer is what I do. And what's funny with these little 4 to 5-month-old puppies, you pop that auto backer up when they're coming in over a little hill and they see that auto backer. And what I do to start out with is I'll put like a pigeon in there with like maybe a few feathers pulled on each side, so that when I do pop it, okay, now I'm going to work off the reward base again. And so I pop that backer up, and they're always going to stop, and they'll stand there and they'll be high head, high tail, and they're looking at it. Then the tail might come down, the ears, and they're like, oh boy, what is that now? They don't even know why they stopped. Now they're starting to think, right? And they're like, oh, okay. Pop that bird then at that moment, and they see that little pigeon come up, but it's going to fly maybe 10 yards and it's going to land. Now they're going to get a retrieve for that. And I might fire a cap pistol in the 2. Now they're starting to associate, oh, that dog was pointing a bird. And so I start off at around, like I said, 4 to 5 months of age with an auto backer, because I use, again, Ed Radar's old Inatex. and I know you can't buy some of this stuff anymore. So I and about 5 of my buddies scour the internet and try and find every used piece of equipment. And I'm giving out my secret right now. So everybody else going to start buying all the old Initech stuff, because I still use the old Initech traps too, because they fly, the birds come out higher. So I've got just gobs of stuff here to keep fixing them and making them work. And I've been trying to talk with Steve Snell too, to try and develop something a little better than what's out there, because the Initechs in my eyes are still the cat's meow. And I know Gun Dog Supply has sold them, but trying to get some transmitters and stuff a little tough. But yes, the auto backer is key in starting and fostering your backing, because all your puppies have it. You just got to foster it and bring it out. Your dog should be at 6 months of age, should be backing, and you should be able to hunt them with your older dogs for sure, you know.
But so if you've missed that stage, you can still do this with an adult dog, and it's really no different. If you don't have an auto backer, then I would tell you, find a friend with a white short hair, a white pointer, and that is super steady, and that you can, we call them beat up dogs.
Yeah, some people don't like that term, but they're generally dogs that are super staunch. They're super resilient, and they're advanced dogs, and we'll put release traps up in front of them. You know, I use an auto backer to start teaching even the older dogs. Like, say if you have a 2 or 3 year old dog and you want to start backing, we'll use the auto backer. But if you don't have the auto backer, same theory, put a dog on point on a couple of traps. We use the stop to flush method. So your dog has to stop to flush as well. When they see a bird fly, we want them to hit the brakes, but then I'll start shooting those birds and give them the reward. So again, it's reward based, to where they learn, oh gosh, if I stop and back that dog, I get a retrieve.
So if you teach your established dog, make sure that they know steady to flush, then you can incorporate that other dog. Can't do it too much to that pointing dog, or you have 2 traps so that they both get a retrieve. And I know that used to be taboo that the backing dog should never have a retrieve. That is how you prevent the souring. Is that dog also gets a reward. But it's also when it's sent, not when it's just when it chooses to.
Yeah. My backing dogs get a lot of retrieves. In fact, I've had some people that have come over here and trained with me, because they call me up, and we had a gentleman from Canada last year. He could not get his dog to back. And he called me up, and he was running the invitational, and then I put my buddy on to help him, because he was a little closer driving distance with him. But you know what we'll do too is, if they sour, there's a lot of things that people just take birds away from dogs, and birds actually teach them to do things right, especially if they're doing them wrong. So a lot of times on a dog that won't back, I'll take the birds away from them when they point, and they only get a retrieve and a reward when they back. Wow. So now they're looking for that dog. They want, if they're going to get a retrieve, they're going to be looking for the dog. But a lot of times too, we'll bring the dog in, and then I'll pop the bird and they stop. And then I'll throw another bird and I'll shoot, and I'll give that dog the retrieve now. And they're like, well, why would I give him the retrieve? He didn't stop on his own. I said, just give him the retrieve. Just appease me. And we'll do that 3 or 4 times in a row. And then all of a sudden that dog would come over the hill and just bam, just smack that other dog. And it was like, this makes no sense. And I said, exactly. I said, but you got to teach them that they get a reward. Instinct. That's just instinct. That dog that they're backing, just got to think of it as a bird. Okay. That's all you want them to do, is point that bird, which is a dog, but you got to treat that other pointing dog as a bird. That's how you want them to react to that other dog, is if they're going to creep in on it, you're going to pop that trap, right? Because if that's a bird, that bird's not going to allow that to happen. So that's how you want to use the release traps in those instances. But our backing dogs get a lot of retrieves. And that's how we keep that intensity and that willingness to do it, for sure.
I never would have thought of that. Never. I would have think all right, our dog's on her. They're, you think they never should retrieve, but wow.
Some breeds, it's not quite as instinctive, and so you have to find a way to entice them.
Very cool. All right, hold on a minute. We got good stuff. What degree of steadiness would you require if you were training a dog for hunting just for yourself?
So, in fact, I just sent 3 of them home. I really only recommend just steadiness to shot fired on I would say the majority of my people that are looking for just strictly hunting dog, we only steady them till the shot fired. Now, generally, those dogs with my program and the way I throw so many birds, if I throw a bird and I shoot and they see it's not hit, they'll actually just stop themselves because they realize the bird wasn't hit and they're not going to get a reward, right? And that all goes back to the early stages of how I trained it. They realized, well, there's no sense in chasing this bird because I'm not going to get a reward, right? But if they see it falling, you know, Katie bar the door. So steadiness to the shots fired is about as far as I go. And that's for a couple of different reasons. Because if I'm going to start training some of my duck work and stuff too, I don't want to completely steady the dog. But the majority of my hunting dogs that I train for people is steady to shot.
It definitely improves their marking.
Yep.
Well, don't take this person who asked this question too seriously because it's Mike Lardy. But he asked.
Oh. Mike, speaking of backing, Mike came over last year and trained with me.
I'll be darned. Well, Mike asked, if you couldn't hunt with a pointing dog, would you rather have a cocker or a retriever?
An English cocker.
Cocker.
There you 100%.
Go. Yep. In fact, we keep trying to figure out how someday we can get an English cocker into our life.
Well, I see quite a bit of them down in Georgia. They're kind of
they're just very popular in the South.
They're fun little dogs.
We
actually we went to the English Cocker Nationals just north of us for Purina, probably
20 years ago.
20 years ago, and we fell in love with them.
Yeah. They're fun dogs.
So when a dog is soft, how much do you adjust your training style?
Okay, Marilyn's got a little smile on her face because I don't believe many dogs are soft. I don't like that word soft. Generally, that's when we talk about mental stability and mental weakness and such. A lot of dogs that people think are soft, they're created, and it goes back to the stuff we talked about with the puppy, right? If you think the dog is soft or breaking down or a little weak, people back off right away rather than kind of pushing through it.
I'm giving you this, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
And they end up nagging. They end up nagging the dog a little too much, and then the dog just becomes complacent with that, and that's how they start. What's the word I'm looking for?
They become manipulative.
Yeah, they start manipulating you, and then they've won, right?
We want them to use their talent for good, not getting out of the work.
You're right. So, once sensitivity becomes a defense mechanism, then who's training who?
Correct. Yeah. And we see it, some breeds are specifically, people will just right away go to it with certain breeds, like Brittany's or French Brittany's or, some of them, they right away want to say, well, they're generally a softer breed, or setters. They can't be force broke. I have force broken, a couple of the Bird Brothers setters, which are fantastic. And man, they turn out to be just incredible hunting dogs. I've put prize and utilities and stuff on several Brittany's. And then a buddy of mine had a bunch of Frenches and he didn't think he could ever push them to the level that he does. And now that he's built that mental toughness within his dogs, he's like, holy cow, the sky's the limit. So a lot of that is just created. So what you need to do is you just got to keep pushing that dog a little more every day. And when you might think I'm known to push a little bit, and because I'm always that train that's going up the hill, I think I can. I try and push my dogs so that they start realizing, oh, holy cow, I can't even believe I did that. So I keep building them and building them. I always want to build, like when it comes to retrieving, I want to build what I call an arrogant, cocky retriever. And I want pretty much an arrogant, cocky dog when it comes to a hunting dog. I want them to believe they can accomplish and do anything, just like so many people raise their kids when it comes to sports and all that. So just keep expecting more of your dog, maybe push them a little more, and then try and end up on a good note. There are times when I end up in sometimes a confused dog wants to really learn. So sometimes I'll push them to a little confusion, then I help them out and push them through it. If I'm confused, I want to learn how to do something right? So sometimes when I'm pushing dogs, I may push them into a little bit of a confused state so that I can help them out with it. And then they look at me like, I'm the man, right? So that's what I would recommend, is just keep pushing them a little harder than what you may think you can. I think you'll be surprised at how much further they'll come.
I think the one thing that I would say would be different is that it's super important you don't lose your cool.
Correct. Keep your
those soft dogs are just more reliant on you. And when you lose your cool, that's when they lose their confidence. And so it's super important to have your self-control, that if you get into a moment where you either can't get yourself out of the pickle, you don't know how to think through it, stop. Take a break, put the dog in a kennel, give it some water, take 15 minutes, come back out and try to go through it again. Those dogs, if anything, are just really feed off of that negative energy.
She's absolutely correct. And that's one thing, like, you know, I don't know what kind of training they're actually doing or where they're at in their training, whether it be retrieving or they're using e-collars or what. It's just keep your composure, keep your cool. And then the one thing that is very critical is you have to make sure that you have the right to do what you're doing, or push the amount that you're pushing them. You have to make sure you have the right to do that. You have to, and what I mean by that, in all my training, when I ask somebody, is like, well, do you have the right to do that? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, do you have the foundation laid for you to push the dog like you're pushing them? You know, and it's about keeping your composure and making sure you have the correct foundation to do what you're doing.
You know, the trap that most people fall into is they want to bribe them with praise.
Correct. Yep.
And pretty soon you actually just end up rewarding underachievers. And so you're right. I mean, I say all the time, some of the really good dogs I've been around were just that way. And when you almost were able to ignore the sensitivity and explain to them they have a job and then reward them when they started to try, all of a sudden that sensitivity actually worked in your favor instead of against you.
Yeah, and you got to be able to, you know, like in all of my seminars, which I'm sure you do too, it's all about reading the dog's body language, and you have to be able to read, react, and adapt quickly, you know, within seconds. And so that's where it becomes very important about, you know, watching your dog's body language and reacting and then adapting to it and moving on.
One piece of advice, particularly for people that train alone, and I know it makes people uncomfortable, put your phone on a tripod somewhere and record yourself, because you won't even know what you're doing and the signals that you're sending. As soon as that dog starts to act soft, look what you're doing. And that's probably one of the things that Clyde does a lot. It makes people super uncomfortable. He'll videotape them and they'll be like, I didn't do that. And we're like, well, here, let's go back and look at it.
And I have clients send me videos all the time. In fact, before we got on, I had a client send me 3 or 4 videos of how he's doing things, because I taught him a different way of doing something. And he's like, holy cow, I can't believe the difference. And, you know, so they send me videos all the time for me to look at them. And, you know, but that's a key thing we always tell people is record yourself if you can.
I do it every time. And I preach exactly the same thing. I don't even know what to say.
That's great.
Let me grab a couple of these questions and throw them up, because I've got you guys. You're already close to an hour here. Here we go. Clyde, have you ever seen a flushing board? It's an 8-spring loaded launchers are released by a string. Release the birds if the dog moves, shake the string, and usually stops the dog. Gunfire is used for every other bird. I'm not real familiar with that. Is this something?
I'm not either. My question would be, so when I create wild bird situations, if I have to pull a string, because I know there are some launches that you can use to pull a string, you know, to release the bird, sometimes our timing can't be correct. So I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about. But I do know that there are some strings that do attach to some launches that aren't remote. So when I talk about creating wild bird situations as well, I think it would be important for me to talk about this a little bit. So many people, when they have, in fact, I had a couple of guys come up, actually, when I did a seminar, I'm like, okay, you guys just show me how you train and I'm going to walk with you. And they're like, well, you don't want to just show us how you do it. I'm like, no, I said, I want to see how you guys are training. And then, so we go through this for a couple hours, and then I'm like, okay, all right. So we're walking up, the dog's on point and they have a release trap out. So we do both a combination of release traps and planted chuckers everywhere. So I can create different situations, right? And we're walking up to the dog. I'm like, a gunner's ready. And they look at me like, well, what do you mean? We're still 40 yards from the dog. I'm like, yeah. So I popped the tracker and I said, shoot that bird. And the bird comes out of the trap. Dog's on point, 40 yards away from us. we're within gun range, we pop the bird, we shoot it. We're not in between the dog and that bird to intimidate them and make them be steady, right? But right there is a wild bird situation. How often do we walk up in front of our dogs when we're hunting and flush a bird? Maybe if there was 6 inches of fresh snow, we might have to kick a few pheasants. But sharp tail and stuff, rarely do we walk in front of our dogs and have to flush a bird. So that's where we use release traps to create wild bird situations where the bird comes up, we're taking a 40 or 50 yard shot. We may miss, but we're taking that shot. But if it falls, now the dog might look at us and say, oh gosh, he's a long ways away. I'm just going to break and get that thing, right? So if you want to work, completely steady a dog and stuff, we just create those situations to make them a little tougher and make that dog more prepared for hunting, which is what it all comes down to.
Great. So Jim asks, shoot to retrieve. You will see birds walking around. Many dogs go in after them. How do you deal with this?
So yeah, so when we first moved from North Dakota to Illinois, we started playing the shoot to retrieve game. In fact, Shooter was, I think, second all point dog, and Tess was at one point, she was second or third all point dog as well. I was guiding and Marilyn was running them, but where we did really well with splitting birds was our dogs were completely steady. So if you ran later in the day and there was a couple of 2-3 birds that had covered up and you can split them. Now, I don't know if their rules have changed now or not, but if you could split them back then, you could split them, shoot one bird, heel your dog, send it on a line for it, and when you give a dog a line, they have to take it, right? Because that's how we train them. And them other 2 birds are still off here to the side, and all we got to do is stay away from them for 2 minutes, and then we can come back in and they can repoint them, and then we can work them. If there's a second one there, if there was 3, you can split them again and do that again, and that's going to actually help you a lot. So I would just recommend that they definitely just steady the dog up at least until the shot's fired, to where they got a little more control of the dog, and work, more of these wild bird situations, flushing birds, and having more birds on a single point so the dog doesn't get so worked up with just one bird. If the dog can handle several birds or multiple birds on a point, one bird becomes easy.
And one of the things Clyde does is oftentimes when he has a release trap, let's say uses it to stop a dog in a wild flush situation, he'll have birds around that trap that are planted there that are not in a trap. So that then when that dog looks ahead, it's like, oh boy. And then they see other birds in the area that are walking around. You condition them to it so that they're actually, and you can, or maybe you want to encounter the walking bird first. And as soon as they take a step, have a release right there so that stops them. Do the combination of a release and a bird beside it so that you can use the trap to stop the dog.
We also do that. I got a client down in Iowa now, and this is the one I talked to you about. He sent me a bunch of videos, but his dog, he had made a couple of mistakes in training, and he admits it, but the dog points traps very intensely, but not chuckers, just kind of the way he studied it. He studied it the old school way. He's adapted my method now, and he's like, he sent me a text, I'm never going to steady a dog the old way again. And he's like, how do I get it used to chucker? So that's where we'll use the release traps again, but we'll put the release trap and then we'll have the chucker downwind a little more. So it smells the chucker and it may want to, start taking steps because it knows it can catch them. Where the traps, generally, a lot of dogs realize they can't catch them because it's going to pop. So we incorporate the chucker just downwind a little bit more, because the trap's going to be a little more scent worthy than the chucker, just because they stink more. And we'll put the chucker maybe 5 yards downwind. And if they start creeping on that chucker, we can pop the trap and say, hey, and then they're stopped like, oh gosh, this thing can jump too. That you could put the chuck in the trap, but we'll start working those combinations to try and fool the dog a little bit and then work on our steadiness on that situation as well. So
it's kind of a test-wise dog. So those are the hardest to break. But if you can do the combination of a bird on the ground and a bird in the trap, that's usually pretty reliable.
That's good stuff. You guys have really thought outside the box. And I'll tell you, I've listened to you and this is the way I feel. And I think to myself, well, no wonder you guys have been so successful. You're really innovative in your thinking and fantastic. Well, I've got two more questions. This one comes from Mike's daughter, Kirsten. How do you train a tracking heavy versatile dog to back? Less natural than the breeds you are talking about.
So I would go back to that same scenario where I would teach the dog to stop to flush first, and reward based to where they get, a lot of retrieves by doing it correctly. I would just maybe start by putting the dog on a whoa. Once if you've already taught whoa, it's a little different than how I've done my program. Because she is where she is right now, right? So we can't go back and reteach the dog in my system from a puppy on. So what I would do is you could even put the dog on start stopping the dog on a whoa and then throwing a bird in the air, or you could even start with a bumper, something like that. And then actually get to where the dog's running and then whoa it and throw a bird. And pretty soon you're going to throw a bird and they're just going to stop. And then once they're stopping to flush, then I would start shooting some of those birds. You could use homers just in your yard first. And then once it goes out to the field, and once they stop when you're throwing a bird or using a release trap, then go ahead and start shooting those and giving them a reward. Go walk over, send them. And then once they're stopping to flush, then I would go ahead and try and get an auto back or another dog out there and put some traps in front of it. And then when they come over the hill and they see that dog, pop one bird, and maybe you could have two traps in there and then pop another bird. And if the dog stops, then maybe if the birds have flown away, make sure you have a bird bag on you, walk over in front of that pointing dog, throw another bird, shoot it. And if you want to shoot two, you shoot two, and then give the backing dog one first, so that he doesn't let down or walk away or anything, because you want to keep that intensity there. And then after that dog's made the retrieve, then you can give the pointing dog a retrieve just for standing there so nicely for so long. And that's an area too where so many people, if they're going to give their dog a retrieve, this is kind of so many people throw dead birds, and I realize everybody's got budgets, right? So they have to do some things to save some money on birds, because let's face it, birds are getting expensive these days. But birds, when I'm giving backing dogs birds, for instance, I get a lot of people that'll stand back by their backing dog because they don't quite trust them. One thing I'll say, when you're teaching dogs backing, let's just say you had a pointer and you went out with me and we went out hunting. If your dog goes on point and my dog backs, I'm not going to stand back by my dog. And this is how we see so many people even training for the NAVHDA Invitational, because, well, I have to stand by my dog in the test. Why would I go up in front and shoot birds? Well, because you're trying to make this realistic, right? So as the backing dog backs, I don't ever tell any of my people to stand back there. I want them up front, engaged in the pointing dog, because that's where the birds are. And if my dog sees I'm engaged and they know there's birds and they're going to get a retrieve, that intensity and that style is going to come in play. All right. They are going to feed off of that. So it just makes perfect sense that so many people train for a testing system. And that's one thing. I know there's things out there to say that we're big testing people, because we test a lot of dogs, but I train an elite hunting dog that adapts, that can just pass the test. So for me, it's always about creating a great hunting dog. And so everything is based off of what are we going to do when we hunt, or how do we hunt? And so you got to get up there and get involved and flush your bird. So many people don't carry a gun. I'm like, you're carrying a gun. When your dog backs, you're going to walk in front and you're going to shoot the birds with me. You're going to be included in the hunt. Make your dog feel like he's included in the hunt. And then so many people too, they'll just they won't even walk up in front of the pointing dog. They'll just throw a dead bird out and give their dog a retrieve. I'm like, that's like throwing them a candy wrapper instead of giving them the candy. It's like, get up in front of that pointing dog and let the birds flush from in front of the pointing dog. Make it as realistic as a hunting situation as possible.
Ground sending dogs are a challenge. So they either do it because it's their natural inclination, or they're really trying to avoid backing. So I think what Clyde is saying is make all the action in the air, and they will start coming over the hill with their head up looking, as opposed to they're going to unlearn some of that behavior a little bit. It's really key to try to get those ground centers to start looking a
You got
little
to give
bit
them a
more
reason, and that would be my
Yeah.
thing. Is she ground sending, or is the dog
It's hard to tell.
ground
Sometimes.
sending, or is it avoiding it? And you'll see them put their head down and like, I don't see it. I don't see it. So that would be the thing where without seeing what's actually happening, we might actually change how we're going to approach it as well.
I never, ever would have thought that motivating a dog to be steady on an honor through getting them to retrieve would be a way to do it. I learned, I mean, that just has blown me away. That's fantastic. All right, I've got one more question. This one's for Marilyn. What states have the strongest wild quail populations, and what states have lower populations but strong climate and habitat with the opportunity to build?
Well, I'd say, at least currently, I think Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma probably have the strongest populations for wild bobwhite quail. I do believe firmly that we can continue to increase our populations in Iowa and in the Southeast. We're starting to see pockets really. We have a small team in Maryland and North Carolina and South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Alabama, Arkansas. There are pockets that whole Southeast corridor. There is absolutely no reason that you shouldn't wake up and hear a bobwhite whistle all the time. So, and you don't need giant pieces of property. What you need is contiguous and connected pieces of property. So, 40-acre plots that the birds can migrate in between. So I think there's a ton of potential in the Southeast, and there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of small farmers there that, particularly those that are getting back into cattle ranching and have small 40-acre, 120-acre paddocks that they want to bring back into ranching. That's a fantastic opportunity. As they say, what's good for the herd is good for the bird is absolutely true. Obviously, Western birds are very different, and, they're very drought sensitive. So it really depends on the year. And, Arizona has had some pretty tough, hot conditions in the last few years, and they haven't had a lot of monsoons. So it's still too early to say what the Arizona population is going to look like this year. There are wonderful pockets. Last year, gambles were just off the charts, but Merns were down. And that makes sense because Merns really need those monsoons. What I would tell you is that very soon we'll start releasing those bird counts, and you'll be able to get a good sense of where they are. But I think there's a tremendous amount of growth opportunity in the Southeast for wild bobwhite quail to return.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much for taking the evening. I just thoroughly enjoyed it myself. Like I told you last night, this was going to be a conversation between us that everybody else was going to eavesdrop on. So that's exactly the way I felt. And someday I'm going to sit in that room with you and have some of that bourbon over your shoulder.
Oh,
and we'll solve a lot of problems.
We hardly
drink
we
it.
don't
So
drink it.
You're welcome to a lot of it.
Our clients keep bringing it, and it keeps getting stuck in there. And
Come on.
That's fun. Well, don't threaten me with a good time. I'll be over there. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you do. Truly a pleasure. And good night. And
yep, thank you, and thanks to Purina again for all that they do and everything that you do, and all the listeners. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.